It has been 1 year since fentanyl exposure at a Bronx daycare killed a toddler. It's a story that shocked our community and shined a spotlight on the dangers of the epidemic. As Jenna DeAngelis reports, today that little boy was remembered as his family continues their fight for justice.
White balloons ascend alongside a street sign as it's unveiled.
Nicholas Otoniel Felix Dominici Way.
The intersection of Kingsbridge Terrace and Kingsbridge Road now bears the name of the 22-month-old 1 year after his death.
For my family, it's that happened today. It's still painful.
The pain is ever present for the parents of Nicholas Feliz Dominici, who lived his last moments at a Bronx daycare where he was exposed to fentanyl.
No sé cómo he durado un año sin mi hijo aquí.
She says, I don't know how I'm here today. I would have wanted to go with Nicholas, but I have 4 other children to look after, and I want to make sure that Nicholas's life saves other lives.
His parents pushing for change in their son's name, expressing gratitude to city and state lawmakers who have introduced legislation to enhance safety at daycare facilities and reduce drug violence.
Through all of this unimaginable pain, we are going to find purpose that allows his death to not be in vain.
Just this summer, 2 men pled guilty, admitting to operating an illegal fentanyl operation out of the daycare, according to prosecutors.
We are going to hold accountable those who caused Nicholas's death.
City leaders promising justice, but also to never forget him.
We want to remember him with music, with dance.
All the things Nicholas loved. And now the intersection near where he lived will always be a place of reflection.
We see a lot of dark around us, around the city, but we know the light will turn on and will be brightened over us.
The family closed the night here at Our Lady of Angels Church for a private memorial mass and candlelight vigil.
Fentanyl in the Playroom, the Bronx Daycare tragedy.
Good morning to you. The authorities say fentanyl is now the most urgent threat the nation faces. It's killing tens of thousands of Americans every year, including a 1-year-old here at this daycare. You can see the mementos left in his memory. And now the owner is accused of using the place as a stash house for drugs.
This morning, the owner of Divino Nino Daycare is locked up on federal drug charges, accusing her of storing fentanyl on playmats children use to take naps.
One of the most reckless things that a human can do, to endanger the life of a child like that.
Inside the daycare, investigators say they found large quantities of fentanyl, along with machines and supplies to package it for sale.
Was this daycare meant to hide a drug operation?
So, Aaron, these drug traffickers, they don't care. They could care less about the people that they're putting in harm's way. And in this case, these babies were poisoned by the reckless, irresponsible behavior of drug traffickers.
4 children became ill after they were exposed, but the owner, Gray Mendez, allegedly called her husband twice before dialing 911. And while waiting for paramedics, prosecutors say her husband was seen carrying heavy shopping bags out a back alley.
All of that happened while the children, the babies, were suffering from the effects of fentanyl poisoning and in desperate need of help.
1-year-old Nicholas Dominici died at the hospital. 3 others were revived with the overdose reversal drug Narcan. The DEA says the case demonstrates the danger fentanyl poses to the country. It's often now mixed into other drugs, but since it's odorless and tasteless, users may never know. Fentanyl-related deaths have increased every year in the last decade. As little as 2 milligrams can be lethal, and the DEA says it seized enough just last year to kill every American.
This morning, Mendez and a co-defendant are being held without bail. She told police she knew nothing about fentanyl being stored here at her daycare. It had just passed inspection, but city daycare inspectors don't check for fentanyl. Why would they? Though the health department says now maybe they should.
Childcare providers are supposed to be the people we trust most with our children. But what happens when that trust is shattered in the worst way possible? While most childcare providers are dedicated and loving, some stories hit the headlines for all the wrong reasons. The Daycare Lounge explores those shocking cases of alleged neglect and mistreatment, sparking necessary conversations about accountability, safety, and improvement in childcare. Real stories, honest discussions, advocating for the well-being of every child. This podcast is here to inform, inspire, and remind us why quality childcare matters. Tune in and join the conversation. Let's get into it. But first, a reminder. The Daycare Lounge isn't just about sharing stories. It's about sparking necessary conversations on accountability, safety, and the real issues in the daycare industry. This case isn't just another headline. It's a real-life situation that raises serious questions about the well-being of children entrusted to daycare providers. Here at the Daycare Lounge, we're not afraid to talk about the good, the bad, and definitely the ugly of the childcare industry. And, as always, a crucial disclaimer. All individuals and businesses discussed in this episode are considered innocent until proven guilty. The details shared here are based on available reports, allegations, and legal proceedings. And so far, 2 of the accused were found guilty. The tragic incident. On September 15, 2023, unfolded at Divino Niño Daycare in the Bronx, New York. A 911 call reported that multiple children were unresponsive. At 2:40 p.m., first responders rushed to the daycare. They found 4 children, aged just 8 months to 2 years old, showing signs of drug overdose. 1-year-old Nicholas Feliz Dominici could not be saved. He was later pronounced dead at Montefiore Hospital. The other 3 children were rushed to nearby hospitals in critical condition. Emergency responders administered Narcan, the opioid-reversing drug, on site. 1 child had to be given multiple doses. She tried to clear out the daycare before first responders arrived. When EMS finally got there, she allegedly lied to officers, claiming the children were just sleepy. But the paramedics knew better. Their tiny bodies were shutting down from opioid overdose.
2 suspects are now facing murder and assault charges. Authorities say they found enough fentanyl in the facility to kill 500,000 people. So joining us now is Gregory Brender. He is the Chief Policy and Innovation Officer at the Daycare Council of New York. Really, really glad to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, this was a licensed daycare, right? Initially, when we heard the story, I thought, oh, it must be unlicensed. It wasn't. So how regularly... You're looking side to side. It was licensed, right?
It was.
Okay.
Yes,
Make sure I got that fact right.
No, it was.
How regularly?
They just passed an inspection.
Okay. How regularly do these places get inspected?
Both daycare centers and home-based family child care programs are very regularly inspected by multiple agencies in both city and state government, as well as often by other nonprofits. Childcare is a highly regulated industry, and it needs to be. Parents are trusting child care providers with their children, their most precious assets. We know that there needs to be a strong and heavily regulated system for parents to have something that they can trust.
Yeah. So, but then you got to wonder, how does a daycare like this slip through the cracks then? What went wrong? What could go wrong?
Yeah, we don't know what exactly went wrong in this situation, and I know that city officials and others are working to get to the bottom of it, and we believe that there will be a swift and an accurate prosecution of what needs to happen there in this situation. But city and state officials here in New York are working hard regularly to make sure that child care centers and family-based child care homes are not just safe, but also developmentally appropriate, that these are places where parents want to have their kids, that these are places that nurture and help them grow and help them learn during the years that are the most important years of brain development.
So let's talk some specifics, Gregory. What qualifies as a daycare? Is a person, a couple that are watching, let's say 3 kids that are not their own, is that considered a daycare, or is that just babysitting? And what steps does a traditional daycare need to go through to become operational and to function in New York City?
There's multiple modalities of early childhood in New York City. There are child care centers, which have a very rigorous process of inspections both by the health department, the fire department, if they're part of the Department of Education's publicly funded system, additional inspections as well as applications to Department of Education. For home-based programs, there are similar systems. They have to not only have their space inspected, but everyone who lives in the home, regardless of whether they're part of the operation of the child care program, needs to go through background checks. Be checked not
Everybody
just
who lives in the home?
Yes.
Wow.
Not just background checks for criminal background checks, but against the state's registry for child abuse and maltreatment.
So then, in this case, we had somebody living in the facility, we're told, who may have been, it's alleged, may have been producing fentanyl. So then, I have to ask you, do things need to change? I don't know, is it up to the daycare provider to give you a list of people living in the home? Is it up to them to come forward with that information?
It requires collaboration, really, both from providers and from government. They both have a really essential role in ensuring safety. There's a lot of inspections, but there can't be inspections every day that there is, because there are thousands of early childhood programs. And in fact, we need more early childhood programs, not less, because there are families who are desperately trying to find childcare. So it really requires action on both the providers and government to make sure that something like this never happens again. And really, not just that something like this never happens again, but that you're creating spaces that are nurturing and positive for the kids to be in.
But if a provider says, okay, there's 3 people here and there's a 4th person, I mean, how do you know?
That's why there's
it's up to the provider.
That's where it's up to either reporting or the inspections.
So there are a lot of parents who are going to be watching this. Obviously, this has become a big story. It's not just a New York story, it's a national story now. And people are saying, wow, I'm scared if I'm sending my kid. I have a 7-month-old who's in daycare right now. And of course, my wife and I were like, well, let's listen to this story and see what the reporting is. But what are the statistics like in, for example, New York State? Is this uncommon? I mean, what kind of injuries have we seen in New York over the last 5 years? Has there been anything that's happened that has caused the state to become tighter with the restrictions?
This is a very uncommon occurrence. There are thousands of early childhood programs operating in homes, operating in child care centers every day, and a tragedy like this is not something that comes along often. But I think that there is an interest both in government and providers in making sure that every center and every home is a safe and positive place. And I know that the early childhood providers everywhere are mourning with this family.
Following the children's hospitalization, the DEA launched an immediate investigation. What they uncovered was horrifying. Underneath a trapdoor in the floor, inches away from where children napped and played, authorities found over 11 kilograms of fentanyl and heroin, a kilo press machine used for drug packaging, hidden in a playroom closet, drug paraphernalia, evidence of large-scale trafficking. Authorities believe the children were exposed to fentanyl through residue on the floor, toys, or even in the air. Fentanyl is so potent, even trace amounts can be fatal, especially to tiny bodies. So what exactly is fentanyl, and why is it so dangerous? Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine and about 50 times stronger than heroin. It was originally developed for use in hospitals to treat severe pain, such as for advanced cancer patients or after major surgeries. But on the streets, and in this tragic daycare case, it's a silent killer. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl, about the size of a few grains of salt, can be deadly. And in children, the risk is even greater. It can be absorbed through the skin, inhaled through the air, or ingested unknowingly through residue. The effects are devastating: sudden drowsiness, respiratory depression, unconsciousness, coma, and death. Once it enters the body, fentanyl works quickly, shutting down the respiratory system and stopping oxygen flow to the brain. Without immediate intervention like Narcan, victims often die within minutes. The idea that toddlers were crawling on floors or playing with toys potentially dusted in this deadly substance, it's beyond chilling.
I'm glad it's you, not somebody else. I'm glad it's you, not somebody else. I think that's the DA's videographer. Yeah.
Do you have to stay here until everybody's out?
A lot of juggle.
Okay.
Yeah. Later.
By the time EMS arrived, it was too late for Nicholas. One child was in cardiac arrest. 2 others had to be revived with Narcan. This wasn't some shady building. This was a state-approved childcare facility. Licensed, inspected, open since January 2023. No prior violations, no red flags. Divino Nino had been operational since January 2023 and had passed inspections prior to the incident. There were no reported violations or offenses before the tragic event. However, the discovery of a kilogram of fentanyl and drug paraphernalia hidden within the facility raised serious concerns about the effectiveness of those inspections. But behind closed doors, it was a drug mill. And while the surviving children recovered physically, their families carry emotional scars that may never heal. Because how do you explain to a toddler that their daycare, the place with toys, stories, and nap time, was a front for fentanyl.
The Bronx Daycare owner is set to appear in court today in connection with the overdose death of a toddler in her care. A judge is expected to set a trial date for Gray Mendez today. She was arrested back in October on murder and drug charges in the death of one-year-old Nicholas Dominici after police say he died of a fentanyl overdose in her daycare. Investigators say he was one of 4 children exposed to the drug. 2 other people are also facing charges in this case.
Gray Mendez, the owner and operator of Divino Niño, was arrested first. She tried to cover up the crime. And while those babies fought for their lives, do you know what daycare owner Gray Mendez was doing? She was deleting text messages, over 21,500 of them, cleared out the daycare, laid calling 911, lied to responding officers, and called her husband, Felix Herrera Garcia, who showed up and was seen on surveillance leaving with bags, allegedly full of evidence. Felix didn't stick around. He fled all the way to Mexico. But thanks to international cooperation, he was captured and extradited back to New York.
Husband of the Bronx Daycare owner was taken into custody on a bus in Sinaloa, Mexico, after a manhunt that lasted more than a week. Prosecutors say Felix Herrera Garcia was seen leaving the daycare on surveillance video carrying 2 shopping bags after being tipped off by his wife, Gray Mendez, that police were on the way. Authorities say she called Garcia before calling 911 to report 4 of the children in her care were unresponsive.
All of that happened while the children, the babies, were suffering from the effects of fentanyl poisoning and in desperate need of help.
The funeral for 1-year-old Nicholas Dominici was held last week. He and 3 other children, ages 8 months to 2 years old, were poisoned by the deadly drug after coming into contact with its residue at the daycare center on September 15th.
We had fentanyl in a daycare center.
Police later revealed that bags of suspected drugs were found hidden under a secret trapdoor under the floorboards of the daycare center where the children played. And a kilo of fentanyl was found sitting right on top of children's mats used for napping.
They were running a drug operation from a daycare center, a place where children should be kept safe, not surrounded by a drug that could kill them in an instant.
As horrifying as this story is, it could have been a lot worse. A source tells CBS New York that those 3 children who were hospitalized thankfully have recovered.
The fallout was massive.
We're here to give you a briefing on a terrible incident that took place earlier today with 4 children who appear to have come in contact with an opioid that led to hospitalization for 3 of the children, and 1 child is DOA, died from this interaction. Commissioner Caban will give an overall update, and Chief Kennedy will give the preliminary information that we have available at this time, and Dr. Fassan will give the overview on these types of substances and what was the role in inspections that took place with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say our thoughts and prayers with the family at this time. Tonight is every parent's worst nightmare. Our children are a gift from God in this world. They're innocent. We must always protect them. As a father, I can tell you, my kids are my heart, and my heart is heavy this evening. As we stand here in this hospital, 1 baby has passed away, 1 fights for their life, and yet another is still under medical care. I don't know exactly what happened to those babies. My chief detectives, Joe Kenny, is leading the investigation and will get us those answers. And he will share what he knows at this moment. But for now, there is one thing I do know, and that is we should not be here. These children do not deserve this. So please pray for them and their families. I will now turn it over to our chief detectives, Joe Kenny.
Thank you, Commissioner. At 2:43 this afternoon, we received a 911 call for 3 unconscious children at 2707 Morris Avenue here in the Bronx. This location is a daycare center named the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center. Here we found 3 children, 2 males, 2 years old, 1 female, 8 months old. All 3 children were unresponsive and demonstrating symptoms of opioid exposure. Narcan was administered to all 3 of these children in an attempt to save their lives. 2 children survived, unfortunately. 1 male, 2 years old, passed away at Montefiore Hospital at 3:29 p.m. Additionally, we learned that another child, a male, 2 years old, was removed from this same daycare center earlier in the day at 12:15 p.m. Once home, the child's mother noticed that the kid was acting lethargic and unresponsive. He was brought to Bronx Care Hospital, where he was administered Narcan, and his life was saved. The NYPD executed a search warrant at this daycare center, where we discovered a kilo press. This is an item that is commonly used by drug dealers when packaging large quantities of drugs. This is an active criminal investigation. The children involved are 3 males, 2 years old, 1 female, 8 months old. 1 child was brought to Bronx Care. 3 children were brought to Montefiore Hospital. 207 Morris Avenue is a licensed daycare center by the state of New York. It was last inspected September 9th of this year, where no violations were observed. This investigation is ongoing.
Hello, I'm Dr. Vassan from the Department of Health. As a doctor, as the city's doctor, as a father of 3 small kids, as a New Yorker, my heart's breaking tonight for this family that's lost their precious 1-year-old son. I'm here today to talk a little bit about what we know about the site at which this event happened. This was a home-based child care site under the official authority of the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene conducts inspections on behalf of OCFS and inspected, as Chief Kennedy just described, inspected this site as recently as September 9th and found no violations. This is a new site. It was opened in January of just this year. Had its routine inspections, 2 in the beginning in order to get its license, and 1 surprise visit. That was the September 9th site, and no violations were found. I want to talk a little bit, secondly, about fentanyl and opioids in general. We've heard a lot about fentanyl. We've prioritized the overdose crisis in this administration's mental health plan because we know it affects everyone, and tonight that's been brought home to bear in this challenge we face. A small child, not someone we would think would be at risk of interacting with opioids, has come into contact with a powerful substance, which can, through either inhalation, ingestion, or in touching of the skin, intoxicate the recipient. We don't know what happened in this case, and as the chief said, there is an active investigation. But what it tells us is that the overdose crisis affects all of us, which is why it's an all hands-on-deck public health moment. So once again, our hearts go out to the family for their loss.
Thank you. And as Chief Kennedy stated, this is an active investigation, and we are going to find out the cause of this incident. And to the families, this is clearly an impact on us all. To lose a child and just listen to the ages of these children, and speaking with the mom and dad a few moments ago and seeing the pain that they are experiencing is something that all of us as New Yorkers are experiencing, and all of us who are parents. This crisis is real, and it is a real wake-up call for individuals who have opioids or fentanyl in their homes. The mere contact is deadly for an adult and is extremely deadly for a child. We are really sending out a message to all New Yorkers, but specifically those who have these substances inside their homes. This can have an impact on your family and an impact on your children. Our hearts break for these families that are involved. We will lift them up in prayer, and we will get to the bottom of this.
The U.S. Attorney's Office brought down the hammer. The charges included conspiracy to distribute narcotics resulting in death, possession with intent to distribute, criminally negligent homicide, endangering the welfare of a child.
Mendez's defense asked for $100,000 bail, saying she's not a flight risk, but the judge denied it. When questioned by detectives, both Brito and Mendez denied knowing anything about drugs at the daycare.
Gray Mendez pleaded guilty on October 29, 2024, and was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison on March 3, 2025. Her husband, Felix Herrera Garcia, pleaded guilty on June 10, 2024, and received the same sentence on October 16, 2024. Neither faced a jury trial. They accepted plea deals before trials began. The network didn't stop with them. Others were also implicated. Carlisto Acevedo Brito, Felix's cousin and a tenant at the daycare, charged with narcotics distribution resulting in death. Renny Antonio Parra Paredes, a.k.a. El Gallo, charged with conspiracy to distribute narcotics resulting in death.
The husband of the owner of that Bronx Daycare, where a 1-year-old died of fentanyl poisoning, has now been sentenced. Felix Herrera Garcia will spend 45 years in prison. He pled guilty to federal drug charges.
That's some breaking news into the newsroom. The operator of that daycare in the Bronx, where 4 kids were poisoned by fentanyl, remember that? One of them died, had just been sentenced to 45 years in prison. 45 years for Gray Mendez. He pleaded guilty back in October, you might recall, and for her role in the trafficking of fentanyl out of the daycare center. In September 2023, investigators found Mendez and her husband were storing packages of fentanyl underneath the floorboards in a room where kids as young as 8 months were playing. 1-year-old Nicholas Da Vinci died due to that exposure. Menendez's husband, Felix Herrera Garcia, was also sentenced to 45 years back in October.
This is a resounding victory for law enforcement and for all of these families that are fighting this fentanyl crisis.
Frank Tarantino, DEA New York's a special agent in charge Monday night after a federal judge sentenced a Bronx daycare owner, Gray Mendez, to 45 years in prison for possessing and conspiring to distribute narcotics and exposing 4 children to fentanyl, including 1-year-old Nicholas Dominici, who died after ingesting the lethal drug. Police said they found more than 2 pounds of fentanyl at the daycare, including a trapdoor with a secret compartment.
They were storing the drugs right underneath the play mats in the daycare, using different utensils to mix up the drugs, but also to make their lunches. This is completely irresponsible and reckless, and this person deserves the 45 years that they got today.
Mendez apologized to Dominici's parents in the courtroom and asked the judge and prosecutors to, quote, please have some pity on me. Outside of the courthouse, Dominici's mother, in tears, said in Spanish, let God forgive her. My son won't return with, I'm sorry. The tragedy in September of 2023 prompted safety concerns at daycare centers at private residences. CBS News New York shed a light on loopholes in inspection protocols. A spokesperson for Childcare Aware, an organization that works to ensure kids have safe, quality, and affordable care, says the sentencing is an important step, reassuring the health and safety for all students in New York City.
You should never bring your kids to the daycare, drop them off, and then receive that phone call. That's just a tragedy that no parent should ever have to face.
Mendez's husband and co-owner of the daycare, Felix Herrera Garcia, was also sentenced to 45 years last year. Jennifer Bisram, CBS News, New York.
They trusted their son would be kept safe at daycare. Instead, he died after ingesting fentanyl. Today, the owner of that daycare in the Bronx was sentenced to 45 years behind bars. And Jennifer Bisram reports on the emotional day in court.
This is a resounding victory for law enforcement and for all of these families that are fighting this fentanyl crisis.
Frank Tarantino, DEA New York's a special agent in charge Monday night after a federal judge sentenced a Bronx daycare owner, Gray Mendez, to 45 years in prison for possessing and conspiring to distribute narcotics and exposing 4 children to fentanyl, including 1-year-old Nicholas Dominici, who died after ingesting the lethal drug. Police said they found more than 2 pounds of fentanyl at the daycare, including a trapdoor with a secret compartment.
They were storing the drugs right underneath the play mats in the daycare, using different utensils to mix up the drugs, but also to make their lunches. This is completely irresponsible and reckless, and this person deserves the 45 years that they got today.
Mendez apologized to Dominici's parents in the courtroom and asked the judge and prosecutors to, quote, please have some pity on me. Outside of the courthouse, Dominici's mother, in tears, said in Spanish, let God forgive her. My son won't return with, I'm sorry. The tragedy in September of 2023 prompted safety concerns at daycare centers at private residences. CBS News New York shed a light on loopholes in inspection protocols. A spokesperson for Childcare Aware, an organization that works to ensure kids have safe, quality, and affordable care, says the sentencing is an important step, reassuring the health and safety for all students in New York City.
You should never bring your kids to the daycare, drop them off, and then receive that phone call. That's just a tragedy that no parent should ever have to face.
Law enforcement sources reported that Mendez and Brito were taken into custody shortly after the incident. there is no mention of other daycare staff being present or involved. Because there was no trial, there were no witness testimonies in court. But during sentencing, the victims' families spoke. Nicholas's mother confronted Mendez, saying she could never forgive her and expressing the irreversible loss of her son. His father, Otoniel Feliz, questioned how a space meant to protect children became a front for drug trafficking. He asked the question on everyone's mind: how do you mix narcotics with childcare?
Now, at this time, I will ask Mr. Feliz if he would like to say a few words. Come on. He is the father of Nicholas.
I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Okay, you're going to speak in Spanish.
Quiero agradecer a todos aquí presentes,
I want to thank everyone who is present here,
en especial a todos los encargados de que este caso llegue al punto en el que está.
specifically to everyone in charge that let this case get to the point where it is now.
A todas las autoridades, la policía, los departamentos de
All
salud,
the authorities, the health department, the police department,
a todo el que ha puesto su parte para que busquemos una solución.
who did their part so that we could find a solution.
Yo entiendo que se va a hacer justicia
I understand that justice will be done,
y todo lo que se haga,
and everything that will be done,
todo lo posible,
everything possible,
no me va a devolver a mi hijo.
it will not bring my son back.
Pero yo quiero hacer algunas peticiones en honor a él.
But I want to make some petitions in honor of him.
Nada no lo devuelve, repito, pero
I repeat, nothing will bring him back.
quiero hacer algunas peticiones en su nombre
But I want to make some petitions in his name.
porque es una parte muy importante de nuestra familia
He is a very important part of our family.
y ahora mismo
And right now,
parte de toda nuestra sociedad.
part of our whole society.
Y en nombre de mi hijo yo quiero hacer peticiones porque
In my son's name, I would like to make some petitions.
las personas mayores, por ejemplo, tienen lugares de cuidado,
For example, have places where they receive care.
pero recientemente se ha patentado opciones para que se le pague a familiares para que los cuiden en casa.
But recently, they now have options so their own family members can take care of them in their homes.
Y si analizamos el presupuesto que se utiliza para una persona mayor, ejemplo de 65
The
años,
budget that's given, for example, someone who is 65 years old,
va a tener cuidado hasta que su vida termine, algunos 90 o 100 años de edad.
until their life ends. Some of them even up to 90 years old.
Pero si para nuestras familias que no confían en los daycare,
But for our families who do not trust daycares,
por lo menos para los niños desde su nacimiento a 6 meses,
children from birth until 6 months old,
o mejor dicho, desde los 6
or
meses
better yet,
hasta los 3 años para ir a 3K,
until 3 years old to go to pre-K,
son solo 2 años.
it's only 2 years.
Se puede buscar un presupuesto para aquellas familias que no confían en los daycare, se le paga a algunos familiares para que cuiden de él.
Who do not trust in daycares, you can pay a family member to take care of them.
Esto no va a beneficiar a mi familia, pero al menos es algo que va a ayudar a nuestra comunidad a salir adelante.
Help our community and help us march forward.
Para seguir trabajando por este bello Nueva York que nos ha abierto las puertas a tantas personas que venimos
Beautiful New York who has opened the doors to all of us people who have arrived
de diferentes partes del
from
mundo.
different parts of the world.
No importa si tenemos documentos
No
legales,
matter if we have legal documents.
si no tenemos documentos
If we
legales,
don't have legal documents,
la ciudad nos abre las
the
puertas
city will open its doors to us.
y le agradecemos como comunidad
And
inmigrante.
we thank you as an immigrant community.
Pero así como trabajamos fuerte por nuestra ciudad,
But the same way in which we work hard for our city,
en nombre de mi hijo, yo pido que las autoridades encargadas analicen esta propuesta
that the authorities in charge analyze this suggestion
y ver qué se puede hacer en ese punto.
and see what can be done to that point.
Otra cosa que quiero pedir en nombre de mi hijo
Another
es
thing that I want to ask in my son's name is
que a partir de ahora,
that from now on,
si van a hacer una inspección en un daycare,
do an inspection in a day.
no mandes un aviso,
Don't
porque
send a prior warning,
cualquier cosa que esté mal
because anything that's wrong
va a estar bien el día de la inspección.
will be fine the day of the inspection.
Hagan inspecciones sorpresa.
Do surprise inspections.
Nunca está de más estar un paso adelante.
It's never too much to be one step ahead.
A los padres,
To the parents,
lamentablemente,
sadly,
tenemos que, en ciertos momentos, como le tocó a mi familia, recurrir a un daycare
like my family, we
para
have to
poder trabajar y salir adelante.
in a daycare in order to work and keep moving forward.
Pero si es la única opción que
If
tienes,
that's the only option you have,
hazlo.
do it.
Sal adelante.
Keep going forward.
No confíes en el lugar al 100%.
Don't trust the place 100%.
Ve de sorpresa, abre puertas,
Go as a
abre
surprise.
gabinetes,
Open doors,
ve donde duermen tus hijos,
see where your children
revisa las almohadas, los colchones,
check the mattresses,
porque no sabemos.
because we don't know
Queremos confiar para salir adelante.
in order to keep moving forward.
Tenemos que trabajar juntos,
We have to work together.
pero cada uno como padre
But each one as a parent,
tiene que estar seguro de que todo está bien en el lugar.
that everything is fine in that place.
Yo como padre tenía miedo de que mi hijo fuera tocado impropiadamente en un lugar de esos.
Feared that my son would be touched inappropriately in a place like that.
Esa es la razón por la que siempre he trabajado yo y mis otros hijos siempre lo cuidó mi esposa.
I have always worked, and my wife has taken care of my other children.
Pero por la situación difícil, por Nicolás lo tuvimos que hacer.
Okay, we had to do so for
Y
Nicholas.
fueron solamente 5
And
días
it was only 5 days
en los que tuve a mi hijo
in which I had
en ese lugar.
at that place.
Y yo esperaba que para dentro de unos 4 años
That within 4 years,
yo tener su foto de graduación de kindergarten.
have his kindergarten graduation photo.
Pero lamentablemente
But sadly,
lo que tengo es un recordatorio de mi hijo,
I have is a reminder
de su muerte.
of his death,
Y eso tiene que cambiar.
and that has to change.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Oh, really emotional there. The father is of Nicholas Dominici, whose son, 1-year-old, was lost at a Bronx Daycare center in a fentanyl poisoning that affected 4 children and took his son. We were listening to New York law enforcement officials, including the Bronx District Attorney, Darcel Clark, announced indictments in the case of a daycare where those children were poisoned.
Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, talking about federal charges regarding the death of a toddler at a daycare center in the Bronx.
Facing
Listen.
federal charges that carry a maximum sentence of life in prison and a minimum sentence of 20 years in prison. I have made addressing the fentanyl epidemic a top priority of my time as U.S. Attorney here. We brought cases against the targets and cartels in Mexico that manufacture fentanyl, against individuals and companies in China that supply the cartels with precursor chemicals needed to make this poison. And we brought cases against the traffickers who move the fentanyl through our streets. But this case is different. We allege that the defendants poisoned 4 babies and killed one of them because they were running a drug operation from a daycare center. A daycare center. A place where children should be kept safe, not surrounded by a drug that could kill them in an instant. Here are some of the facts that we allege in our federal complaint. We allege that 2 defendants, Defendant Mendez and Defendant Acevedo Brito, along with their co-conspirators, ran a fentanyl distribution business out of a daycare center in the Bronx. At approximately 2:40 p.m. on Friday, September 15th, Mendez, who operated the daycare, called 911 to report that 3 children in her care required medical attention. And a 4th child, who was picked up by parents earlier in the day, was also taken to the hospital. 3 children were given Narcan to counter the effects of the opioid poisoning. And 1 child, a 1-year-old baby boy, was pronounced dead. When law enforcement officers searched the daycare, they found a large quantity of fentanyl and machinery used to press and package narcotics for distribution. And in particular, they found a brick of fentanyl, about 1 kilogram in weight, right on top of children's playmats in the daycare's closet. As alleged in the complaint, before emergency personnel arrived at the daycare, before they arrived, Mendez and a co-conspirator tried to cover up what happened. Seconds before Mendez called 911, she called a co-conspirator. Minutes later, a co-conspirator arrived at the daycare. Minutes later, he left the daycare and fled out the back alley, carrying 2 full shopping bags. And all of that happened while the children, the babies, were suffering from the effects of fentanyl poisoning and in desperate need of help. We immediately launched a federal investigation, and we've been working around the clock to uncover the truth. And we're now ready to bring these defendants to justice. This is a tragedy, and my heart breaks for the children and their families. But I promise you this, we're going to keep fighting for justice, in this case and in every other case involving this deadly poison. The people of this great city deserve nothing less. And I also have a message for anyone out there who is selling fentanyl. Stop pushing this poison. It kills. It ruins lives. And it will ruin yours too when we catch you, convict you, and send you to federal prison. Now, we could not have brought this case without the dedication and assistance of our partners at the DEA, the NYPD, and the entire OCDF New York Strike Force. And I also want to thank the SDNY Digital Forensics Unit and the complex analytical and social media enhancement team at the New York, New Jersey HIDA. I also want to thank the Bronx District Attorney's Office, and in particular my friend Darcel Clark, the DA, who has also filed state charges against these defendants. We will continue to coordinate with her office as this case proceeds. And finally, I want to thank the career prosecutors of my office handling this case, Brandon Thompson and Maggie Lanaugh, as well as Matthew Hellman and Kyle Wershba, the chiefs of the narcotics unit. And I want to turn the podium over to Frank Tarantino from the DEA.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Tarantino. I'm the special agent in charge of the DEA New York Division. In my 32 years of government service, 25 of which have been spent serving with the DEA, there is no more devastating news or tragedy than the loss of a child. And every New Yorker should be outraged by this senseless tragedy. Unfortunately, the victim's family joins a long list of hundreds of thousands of grieving Americans who have lost a loved one, 110,684 to be exact, as a result of drug poisoning. Fentanyl is a killer. Fentanyl crept into our illicit drug supply like a cancer, slowly and deceptively, and is now in everything and everywhere, killing victims instantly and indiscriminately. Fentanyl is the most urgent threat in our nation. And the tragedy that unfolded in the Bronx at the Danilo Nino Daycare Center demonstrates the danger that fentanyl poses to every New Yorker. As this investigation continues, I want to reiterate DEA's commitment to holding those predatory criminals accountable for trafficking this poison throughout our communities. I commend the work of our investigators from the DEA Strike Force, the NYPD, and our partners at the Southern District of New York and the Bronx District Attorney's Office, who work tirelessly every single day to stop drug poisonings from taking too many lives too soon. This is not a war on drugs. This is a fight to save lives. Thank you.
Be happy to take some questions.
The co-conspirator described in the complaint, the husband of Mendez, who removed the two bags from the location, why is he not charged, and what is his status?
So we're not done. Let me just put it that way. I think you should just look out for more on that soon. Next question.
How confident are you that investigators will be able to locate that co-conspirator?
We're not going to give up. We're going to get him. Next question.
Thanks. Damien or Frank, were either Mendez or the co-defendant or the husband on the DEA's radar? Is this a location that you had been familiar with previously?
So I'm not going to be able to speak to any kind of broader connections. It's fair to say that this is something that we're going to run to ground and make sure that the case doesn't stop here. Those drugs came from somewhere. We're going to make sure that we get it all the way back to the source.
And Damien, what does it say about, what does this case that, as you say, shocked the conscience of the city, say about where we are with fentanyl and what it's doing to the community?
Look, I've been clear that this is not only a law enforcement crisis, but it's a public health crisis. You know, fentanyl, a tiny amount, almost imperceptible to the eye, can kill an adult. And so imagine what it can do to the body of a little baby, right? That's what we're seeing right now. And so there's no need to panic. However, it's a crisis. And all tools that we have at our disposal need to be brought to bear. That's why I talked about not only targeting the cartels in Mexico and the folks who supply the precursor chemicals in China, but also making sure that we don't take our eye off the ball on Main Street, right, in the corners of our city where the most vulnerable people live and can be harmed by this drug. Next question.
Thank you. Can you tell us if you think there's any connection that they had with existing cartels that have been under surveillance or
other points in the hemisphere, and how reckless was it to have that stuff near where these children would be reposed?
So look, let me address what you asked at the end. I'm a lawyer, right? I'm the United States Attorney here, but I'm a father. And I'm sure many of you are parents too. And common sense dictates that when you drop off your baby, you expect the baby to be kept safe. And so I don't think there's any other way to look at it other than it being incredibly reckless, one of the most reckless things that a human can do, to endanger the life of a child like that.
Fentanyl is flooding communities across the U.S. It's cheap, it's potent, and now it's in daycare centers. This case is a wake-up call for parents, providers, and policymakers. It's a gut punch to the childcare community and a reminder of why the Daycare Lounge exists: to ask the hard questions, to hold systems accountable, and to never let stories like this fade from public memory. That's it for this episode of the Daycare Lounge. Thank you for listening. And remember, daycare isn't just about care. It's about trust. No child should ever be collateral damage in an adult's crimes. To the parents of Nicholas Feliz Dominici, we stand with you. Your grief is valid, your pain is real, and we will continue to say his name. If today's discussion opened your eyes, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Drop a comment to keep the conversation going. And stay tuned for the next episode.